Ah, mate, it's 40 here. It's been a cloudy, drizzly, overcast day. I've just been wandering here in Royal National Park, wandering alone, the wandering Jew, for 3 hours, and finally met people down at the watering hole. So good to see people, and sending like text messages to family members so at least they'd know where to find the body. It's like just godforsaken, nobody out here. The train, stopped at Waterfall, supposed to go all the way to Otford, but electricity went out on the track. So I just saw a hiking trail, got off the station, just started hiking. Here I am. I think I'm about 90 minutes from civilization, listening to Diana Fleischman,
and she
evolutionary psychologist.
wrote a whole book about how these algorithms are replicating our inherent kind of stereotypes. And I think in California there was an algorithm that was used to decide whether or not child protective services should go into a home and see what's going on. And they were looking at income, whether the mother lived alone or with a partner unrelated to the children. Having a man in the house who's unrelated to the children is a very big predictor.
So I ran in, here I am in Royal National Park, Australia, all right, and I ran into this couple, and the bloke, he's El Salvadoran, he owns a gym. Like, who would have thought I'd meet an El Salvadoran in Sydney? Apparently there's a whole community of them. Many of them came as refugees around 1989, so his extended family came here. He was born in Australia and hasn't even experienced like racism and harassment, and spent his whole life basically in Sydney. So who knew there was an El Salvadoran community in Sydney? All right, stereotypes.
Of whether or not this is going to happen. Unfortunately, having an unrelated male in the house is also very predictive of whether or not a family is black or not. With Latinos actually somewhat less common. And so this algorithm was not neutral when it came to where it was sending CPS, and so they ended up discontinuing it, therefore making the process of figuring out where to send CPS agents to see if children were being abused less efficient.
So there's a long article in the New York Times about how in New York social services, they were trying to figure out why they're 8 times as likely to get reports about child abuse with regard to black families and non-black families, and that foster children were like 8 times more likely to be murdered in black families as opposed to non-black families in New York. So most social workers are black, and most supervisors are black, yet the system is still delivering these racially unequal results. Pretty scary how entrenched white racism is.
And nowhere in the actual book did she say the algorithm is, or in the interviews that I've heard, actually read the book, did she say actually that in black families there is a higher rate of child abuse than in white families, for example. And so what it seems like we're doing, what I think is the big lie, is that we are.
Okay, so that would be in certain areas, right? Not a universal principle, not something marked out by the will of heaven, but in certain areas, getting racially disproportionate results with regard to child abuse. Now, I would think that rates of child abuse would essentially correlate with general rates of crime. So people who are careful not to commit crime, going to be much less likely to commit child abuse. And people who are careless with committing crime are going to be much more likely to commit child abuse.
Making our institutions less able to predict human behavior and even to control human behavior for good ends because we are uncomfortable with that control. And so we're saying that all of the measures and ways that you might do that actually don't work. Yeah. I mean, you think about something like Clockwork Orange, that in that film, you are the viewers manipulated into feeling bad for a rapist and a murderer because they've used a technology to undermine his free will when none of us have it anyway. So
it's pretty remarkable, isn't it? I mean, the other lie that you're kind of touching on, which I've observed in the US and Australia, is that incarceration rates are compared to population proportions rather than propensity to commit crime or criminal rates. And once you kind of match those along, it changes dramatically. But then you get into super awkward and controversial territory, which we don't need to do now. So, as a subset of the big lies, I've been fascinated by some of your work, which touches on kind of deliberate lies. So, in the past, you mentioned certain, I don't know how you call them, but value traps left for men, things like vulnerability. So, could you unpack that, and how would you categorize this bundle of that may?
Two single middle-aged women.
So the other point was how we've completely remade our institutions in favor of single middle-aged women.
So, which is fine. I've got nothing. I think it's kind of hilarious and awesome framing. I'm just wondering whether you could tell me if I've mischaracterized
Okay. No, I
that.
think I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So this is a edgy thing to say, but it does seem a little bit like our moral and social institutions. What we think is okay now has been shaped to be advantageous to single middle-aged women. Somebody called this like the feminization or guyfication of culture. I think
it's related to what I said before. I think there absolutely has been I don't think it's controversial, a feminization of society, which is really great because we get less crime and we get all these kind of...
Okay, this is how not to conduct an interview. Don't interrupt the guest to say this relates to what I said before, or this supports what I said, or I think you're basically agreeing with what I said. Right? You can just leave that safely behind.
Good things as well, but then you get these really strange values. In my view, strange because I'm like a 32-year-old guy, I guess. But like in my view, really strange values kind of creeping in.
Okay, none of this adds anything. Just shut up here and let the guest talk.
And taking over the discourse a little more.
Yeah, so I think somebody told me the other day that they thought the podcast had devolved into kind of gossip, and that if you see what mostly people are doing, they're talking about what other people are doing instead of ideas, and that's a feminization. I don't know if that's adequate.
So women, if you interrupt them, they usually won't fight back. Men, much less likely to let you interrupt them. So this is the problem here with a male interviewer, like repeatedly interrupting the woman, and the woman defers and lets him get away with it. While a bloke would be saying, hang on a minute, let me finish my point.
But yeah, one idea, and I actually talked about this to somebody the other day about vulnerability. So women do say that they value vulnerability in men, but there's really only certain kinds of vulnerability that women value in men. And there is this idea that men are supposed to expose themselves, supposed to talk about all of the worst things that ever happened to them, and be super, super honest. And I do think that that's a very good way of getting somebody to reveal very early on, if you have to sort mates quickly, about what you might be dealing with. So whether or not you want to keep them or throw them out. If you are thinking about marrying somebody, I think it is important that somebody tells you some of the worst things that ever happened to them.
So I've got a friend who likes to walk really slowly, and I think it's kind of rubbed off on me. So I used to be a fast walker like my dad, but I think I've become accustomed to walking more slowly to fit in with the rhythm of my very intelligent, brilliant friend, whose company is scintillating. So now I'm habituated to walking slowly, and so now I have a hard time keeping up with those who walk fast, like this young couple I met at the watering hole. They said, we walk fast, and yeah, absolutely no way that I could keep up with them.
What their life has been like, so that you kind of know what you're getting into, what the kind of worst case scenario of that relationship is going to be like. But yes, the idea that men and women should behave in the same way, should reveal their vulnerability in the same way. And then, moreover, the idea that the more emotionally hot you are, the more emotional you are about anything, is some indication of how honest that value judgment is. If I'm very emotional about something, you see this in politics now too, that people are saying that the more emotional you are about any given point, the more likely it is to be true. But with women and men, if you look at the kind of some of the things that have happened in the past few years, women really moralizing against men, calling a man a pedophile if he wants to have sex with a 17-year-old, right, who has gone through puberty, or calling men who saying that men who cheat on their partners or who give a pass at a woman should never have any place in public life again. Those seem like women's value judgments, things that are most advantageous, especially single middle-aged women, being foisted on society.
My favorite example of this is probably Leonardo DiCaprio's dating history, where it's basically as he's gone from 20 to 45 or whatever, the age is like the same, and so like this is just enraged, like a
So 25 years ago, Leonardo DiCaprio and I were dating the same woman at approximately the same time. But I guess our careers have gone in different trajectories.
Portion of the universe into that point. But I think, like, to kind of be more specific, I think another half tongue-in-cheek example of this is, it has been mentioned to be, say wokeness, that men are brought, told to kind of be all woke and be allies or whatever, and then those guys are the ones who actually are left out in the night. You know what I mean? And so again,
It's much easier for a man who says he's a feminist to make a misstep that causes him to be ostracized.
Well, but even like we want to like signal who the partners that they shouldn't choose are, and so they kind of set these traps. And you go, oh yeah, I'm a feminist. I'm on your side. I'm like, okay, that's not the guy, so to speak. So it's even more. I'm only saying this because that's how I understood your point about vulnerability to me. So I'm not proposing this. I'm wondering whether I'm just to be clear. I'm wondering whether I've got the wrong end of the stick or whether I've got examples.
I do think that you are right there. I just read Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity,
and I've read that as well.
I'm actually not a big fan of the book or her approach.
Okay, see, that's where you're hurting the interview, you're hurting the podcast by always interjecting on every point. Okay, so she mentions the name of the book and you jump in and say how you like it. All right, that's unnecessary. And Diana, the guest, she doesn't like the book. All right, so you're just assuming that if she mentions a book, it's because she likes it, and you want to interject with, oh yeah, I like that, I read that. It's unnecessary to talk about how you read the book and you liked it. Just allow the bloody guest to talk, mate.
I like her, actually. She's a very charming woman. But in that book, she talks about how American egalitarianism can be the end of sexual chemistry, so that women talk about how they want somebody who's very egalitarian, who's very sensitive, who's sort of feminized, but that kind of person doesn't make them sexually excited. That women are, in fact, as anybody who thought about evolution for 5 seconds can tell you, more often attracted to men who are showing strong behavioral masculinity than men who are showing less behavioral masculinity. And so there becomes this tension between men acting morally and men acting a way that is attractive to women. And I do think that's something that can probably cause a lot of problems. This couple that I know who actually met, they were like anarchists, and they were both part of Occupy Wall Street, and they had this incredibly feminist egalitarian relationship, and they have gradually become more conservative. And they told me basically that when they figured out that like just adhering to kind of old-fashioned sex roles really made their relationship much easier, when she was doing more detail-oriented things, he was doing more make money kinds of things, that their relationship became more straightforward. So I do think that there's a lot of attention between the sexes, from everything from egalitarianism to the idea that sex roles are arbitrary, which they are not.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this. My wife's a brilliant kind of technologist and roboticist, and it's been hard for her to have 3 kids under 3 and 4, and I feel like I'm deeply grateful that she's done that, but in some respects, I wish she'd go out, and I think she wants to, obviously, so I wish, but I'd love to support her to go out and fulfill those ambitions, and then kind of juggling how we balance our respective careers and raising our children. I mean, these are like hard questions that we haven't invented. These are kind of ubiquitous hard questions, but I'm not diminishing the kind of inherent challenge there at all. So I'd like to move on to sorcery. What I mean by sorcery, so you've written about how women tend to train men and men tend to resist training, and I'd love for you to describe why, in your view, that occurs, and why women have evolved a range of sorcerous, wily skills in verbal cues and manipulation.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned sorcery, because for a little while, given the resurgence in interest in kind of witchcraft and the supernatural, and
which is another feminization thing, right? Like it's.
Well, women love that stuff, and actually, I had a hen do last year. We're all still in touch, and we call ourselves the Coven, and we half the women that I interact with, like even PhDs and stuff, love magic stuff. It's very compelling. And I had an idea of it to organize the book around that. But yes, women.
Why is that? Sorry, I'm actually because I'm.
Yeah, and I've had very smart girlfriends, right? Secular girlfriends. Girlfriends, with secular education, elite university educations, who believe that they had witch-like powers.
Why is that?
I love that you said it's compelling. So,
yeah.
Because to me it's totally baffling. So why is it compelling?
Okay, I used to be quite like a hardcore rationalist. Probably when I was your age, I was like pretty hardcore rationalist. And then I made friends with some women who were into this kind of horoscopes, witchiness, and stuff like that. And it, if you can have a cynical view of it, or if you can suspend your disbelief for a little while, it does make things seem more meaningful and more interesting. It's difficult to describe.
It's a return to an enchanted, magical, mysterious world. The world's more exciting. when you have magic and mystery and horoscopes.
To somebody who's never necessarily felt it, but you feel like you have some extra control, or that you're manipulating consequences. I think women are specifically attracted to witchcraft and these other ideas because it gives you another realm in which you can think about how you might be controlling behavior. So if you think
Right, so the world is so incredibly random and baffling and frightening that we love things that give us an illusion of control, whether it's witchcraft or religion or following a guru.
about, let me just go back to the original idea and then I'll kind of talk about how I think witchcraft is associated with it. So the basic idea is that we're always trying to change each other's behavior, and trying to change each other's behavior was very evolutionarily relevant. And especially men trying to change women's behavior was not as relevant as women trying to change men's behavior. So women wanted men to do a lot more stuff that was complicated and against their nature than men wanted women to do. Really what men care about mostly if they have a long-term mate or partner is that she doesn't have sex with anybody else and she doesn't cuckold him. That's the main thing. But for women, they want a man to take care of her. They want her to take care of her children. Sometimes she wants him to take care of children that are not his own. She wants him to not divest his resources into other women, which is something that's in his strong interests. And so she wants a lot of different aspects of his behavior to be controlled. And that's why I think women find any kind of idea about how to change the environment in a way that manifests their psychological will compelling. And so if you change the immediate environment, you have delicious food, you have beautiful candles or decoration. These are all things that women are more interested in than men. And these are also things that can influence other people's behavior. So women have their niches, but a lot of women are very good at cooking or very good at massage or dancing or art or sex or various other things. And in my framework, that's basically ways that somebody can have a niche in which they can reward other people for the behavior that they like. And yes, if somebody does, it's generally the kinds of witchcraft that my friends do are just basically like, here's like some candles and crystals and things, and this is to show that autumn is coming, and I'm just celebrating the change of the seasons. It's just kind of a way of it's just an aesthetic extension. But if you look at witchcraft and sorcery throughout the ages.
So there's a statement in the Talmud that talks about the three curses of having a female child. That when they're young, you have to watch out for their chastity, and when they're old, you have to watch out for them becoming sorcerers and witches. I don't remember the third one, but these are pretty traditional concerns in male societies.
It's been a way of trying to impose your consequences, your rewards and punishments onto somebody's behavior. So if somebody slights you or behaves badly towards you, then